So, welcome to all of you. And in today's class, we are going to study about what is realism. As I told you, there are different ways of looking at international relations. Realism is a movement which is also in art. So, do not confuse it with that. And here we are specifically talking about realism in international relations. And to make it more easier for you to understand, I'll ask you questions which will make you understand what is your own theoretical perspective when it comes to understanding realism and other varieties of it. So, as you can see, the reference book for this particular session is Making Sense of International Relations Theory. And this is a beautiful book. The second edition of it focuses on the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. And every case study of IR theory is aimed at understanding this particular case study of US invasion of Iraq. That why did US invade Iraq and what are the various theoretical implications of understanding it? So the first question is, what exactly is realism? But before that, I want you to understand two ways of thought structure that operate. There are two ways of thinking about everything which is around you. One is inductive, and the other is deductive. The other is deductive. Now, what is inductive and what is deductive? All of you can see me properly? Okay. So, inductive is जैसे DGP बोलते हैं, and this is IPG, the short form of it. So DGP and IPG, इसका मतलब क्या होता है? जैसे for example, very often when we talk about any particular thought, कि what is your opinion on something, people generally speak from personal opinions and then generalize it. That if this has happened to me, then it must be happening to everyone else. That is inductive philosophy. Say, for example, how many of you have faced sexism in your life? Like, किसी ने अगर हाँ face किया है, okay. Ipshita has raised her hand that yes, she has faced it. Okay. Um, two parts. Aspreet also has raised her hand. Okay. So sexism is basically any kind of uh, degradation or passing of remarks or abusing on the basis of one's sex, which is biological, male or female, or maybe intersex. So if something, say for example, I believe ki acha, I am feeling very cold today, so it must be really cold today, right? That is inductive philosophy because you are going from personal to general कि अच्छा मेरे साथ हो रहा है, I am feeling it, so it must be felt by everyone else also in the at least in Delhi. Deductive is ulta. Deductive is going from general to particular or personal. Say for example, someone is noting down uh, every like okay, every kind of elephant has ivory tusk. We see all the elephants having ivory tusk. That is why we have the muhavra also in Hindi कि दिखाने के दांत कुछ और खाने के कुछ और. So जितने भी elephants को आज तक हमने देखा है तो they must be having tusks. इसका मतलब कि हर elephant का tusk है. So you see what exactly is happening at the general level, and then you come to the particular constraint of it. Then you deduce कि अच्छा ऐसा हो रहा है, so this is deductive thought. So these are two ways of looking at the world and looking at your day-to-day interactions also. Now, realism is deductive. It looks at the sense of world affairs and comes up with its own idea and narrative of what exactly is the truth. And the truth over here is that realism is a predominant IR theory which believes in an eye for an eye, violence for violence, right? Uh, check and mate situation, right? One particular side can succeed only when the other side loses. It cannot happen vice versa. The other side has to lose completely for the other side to win. And it questions कि आप human behavior को how do you look at? What is your conception of the human behavior? Do you see human behavior as revengeful, vindictive, self, not self interest, but selfish? Or do you see human behavior as something which is forgiving and empathy based and loving everyone, innocent and naive? So, how many of you believe that humans are naive and innocent? आप में से कौन बिलीव करता है कि ह्यूमन बीइंग्स जो हैं नाइव और इनोसेंट हैं? हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू थिंक कि नहीं सारे ह्यूमन बीइंग्स जो हैं वो दिल से तो अच्छे होते हैं भले ही टाइम कैसे भी उनको यू नो पेश करे? एनीवन? हैव अ कन्वर्सेशन.
नो मैम।
नो. कोई बिलीव करता है कि ह्यूमन बीइंग्स जो हैं दिल से तो अच्छे होते हैं, टाइम बुरा होता है, या कोई और फैक्टर बुरा होगा, बट इंसान तो दिल से अच्छा होता है? लाइक यू ट्रस्ट इन द अदर पीपल, राइट? तो ये रियलिज्म का थॉट प्रोसेस जब शुरू हुआ, इट स्टार्टेड स्टडीइंग नेचर कि प्लांट को शीप खाएगी, शीप को फॉक्स खाएगा, फॉक्स को टाइगर खाएगा. There's a food chain, and anyone who is weaker will succumb to any kind of problem that is happening. You know, they will be eventually be lost. Darwinism ka bhi jo theory tha, which was social survival of the fittest, was based on this, that we are competing against each other. And India में तो 60,000 बच्चे हर दिन पैदा हो रहे हैं from 2020, every day 60,000. So imagine the kind of resources and the lack of resources we are going to have in the future. So everyone is in a tough competition. And the question then, when you question about any kind of international relations theory, is कि human rights का क्या, इकोनॉमिक इक्वालिटी का क्या, जो कॉपरेशन और सिक्योरिटी की बात चल रही है, कॉमन इंटरेस्ट की बात चल रही है, मोरालिटी की बात चल रही है, उन सब का क्या? सो इसमें रियलिज्म जो है, सबसे प्रिडोमिनेंट जो रियल पॉलिटिक हम बोलते हैं, द टर्म रियल पॉलिटिक, इट इज अ रियलिस्ट पर्सपेक्टिव विच इज की an eye for an eye, tit for tat. That is how lessons are learned. That is, if you don't make the other person suffer the way you have suffered, maybe, then the other person will not understand what you have gone through. Right? So, this is realism. And you will see the extent of it every day in, say, for example, in news. A lot of people say that Delhi is the rape capital of the world, and it is unsafe and it is very difficult. And ये एक generalized opinion है. हम में से कितने के साथ कुछ issue हुआ होगा? But that doesn't matter. How media is portraying and generalizing it, people believe it to be true. You will see people at the age of 55 plus, they start watching a lot of Crime Patrol because they don't trust. And they are quite, like, कुछ देख रहे नहीं हो, but Crime Patrol ज़रूर देख रहे होंगे. Because they start looking at the entire world with suspicion that the entire world is against them. तो ये रियलिज्म का कॉन्सेप्ट शुरुआत से था, एंड इट वाज फ्रॉम नेचर, लुकिंग एट नेचर एंड सीइंग हाउ ह्यूमंस, एनिमल्स, everything survives. If there's, because there is competition, because there is scarcity of resources, in nature, and nature teaches us that there is competition and there is going to be a fight. So, but what is power? जैसे Foucault was a very famous French sociologist. He believed कि जब आपको किसी चीज में resistance अपने दिल में feel होना शुरू कर दे कि you are resisting something, like सुबह का morning है, I don't want to go to college, but I have to go to college because there's attendance. I don't want to take this exam. This examination does not do anything about does not tell anything about my IQ, but I have to take exam because I have to pass and get the degree. I don't want to do this, but I am forced to do this. There is a certain kind of resistance developing in my heart. The moment you have resistance against something, then you should automatically understand that there is some kind of power over you which is acting, and that power mostly is of social institution. आपके social institution में क्या क्या आता है? Family आता है, kinship आता है, marriage आता है, education आता है, employment आता है. ये सामाजिक व्यवस्थाएं हैं जो आपको किसी ना किसी बॉक्स में केज करके रखी हुई हैं. ये सामाजिक व्यवस्थाएं आपके बर्थ से पहले भी थी और आपके डेथ के बाद भी रहेंगी. There will be fluctuations and changes in it, but they will categorically use power over you to put you in a box and to define you. So, this is a simple definition of power, but for international relations, there are myriad ways of defining power. And the simplest reason or simplest explanation of definition of power is that whoever is acting powerful is able to fetch the resource that they want, irrespective of what the other person or the population or the nation or the individual thinks. IR में power is कि किसी भी actor का, now actor here is not Shahrukh Khan, actor here specifically is your nation state. मैंने आपको पिछले क्लास में बताया था कि किस तरीके से 3 levels हैं. 3 levels हैं. पहला level है आपका individual, दूसरा level है आपका nation state और तीसरा level है world system. रियलिज्म नेशन स्टेट के लेवल पे बात करता है, ये कंट्री स्पेसिफिक के लेवल पे बात करता है. द डेफिनेशन ऑफ नेशन स्टेट अगेन इज अ वेरी वेस्टर्न आइडिया. ये यूरोप से ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफेलिया से शुरू हुआ था 1648 में, एंड इट इज लाइक वन नेशन, वन रिलीजन, वन लैंग्वेज एंड ऑल दोज कॉन्सेप्ट्स व्हिच आर इन्वॉल्व्ड इन इट. जस्ट अ सेकंड. So realism believes very strongly in that the actor. इसका पहला क्रिटिक है कि आप इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, आप वर्ल्ड सिस्टम के लेवल पे बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. बट रियलिज्म टॉक्स only and only about the power of actor, which is a country that can control the other country which is weaker and influence the outcome. So for example, your entire colonialism from the realistic perspective was a war game. And it didn't matter to any of the colonial powers, be it British, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Spanish, that what is the outcome on the weaker sections of the colony or individual पे तो किसी ने बात नहीं की. So nation state सबसे ज्यादा decision making में help करता है, and this is every outcome, every event will be decided by it. So what is IR an outcome of? According to realists, जितने भी realists हैं, उनके हिसाब से कि इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस का बहुत सारा आउटकम है, जैसे ट्रेड नेगोशिएशन होता है. अभी यूके ने कल बोला कि वो अपना चैलेंजर 2 मिसाइल्स यूक्रेन को देंगे. उससे पहले जर्मनी ने बोला था कि वो अपना लेपर्ड टैंक्स यूक्रेन को देंगे. यूएस ने 3.25 मिलियन और बिलियन डॉलर्स का सैंक्शन किया है फॉर यूक्रेन. All of it, what is it? It's a trade negotiation in the name of development aid. Human rights violation. As we speak right now, there are human rights violations going on in Chile, in Peru, in Brazil, in between India and Myanmar. Actually, India is going to close down its airspace for any flight that comes from Myanmar. Uh, India China is always there. Like I'm talking about the political skirmish. Economically, we are there. In fact, there's $100 billion deficit actually. And military intervention is when you have boots on the ground. So US invasion of Iraq in 91, US invasion of Iraq in 2003, US invasion of Afghanistan, or Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, um, US invasion of Libya, Syria, all of it. Invasion का मतलब क्या होता है कि जो पर्टिकुलर नेशन स्टेट है उसकी अपनी सोवरेनिटी होती है. सोवरेनिटी का मतलब is independence, right? Like your body has its own autonomy. We say your body, your choice, right? So you have the choice to do whatever with your body, right? But you will often see that the state has repercussions on how you use your body. Like body is the biggest political battlefield also, in terms of abortion, in terms of suicide, in terms of many things. You have to. The moment your body is born, you have to get a birth certificate. Your body is death, your family members need to declare it through a death certificate. All of it, your body is under the state power. तो बहुत सारी चीजें, the trade negotiations, human right violations, military interventions, everything is dependent on which particular actor has power and greater power. And every country has the right to work on their own national interest. It doesn't matter what the repercussions of it are. So I remember when we were in JNU, so we were given this case study of understanding Hiroshima and Nagasaki and understanding it from a realist perspective. That if Truman bombed Japan, was it correct or wrong? The realists would call it correct. Because Japan was then planning another kind of Pearl Harbor attack, and to save itself, if you have 2-3 million people dying and 2-3 billion people surviving, so it is always better to help or to for the nation to carry out its own agenda to save their own population of 2-3 billion, whatever. Though US is not 2-3 billion, but I'm just saying that if Japan was causing or thinking of another bomb attack, so Truman was right to pull the plug according to realist perspective. Now you might have the morality perspective कि morality की तरफ से तो ये गलत है. But realists are not talking about morality. That is the first. It is very savage. They are not talking about morality. They are talking about what steps a greater powerful country can take to save itself on the international stage. और हमेशा condition of warfare रहती है. Every time there is warfare, and there is, maybe it is unipolarity, that there's only one country that is powerful. You have bipolarity, as you had during the time of Cold War. Now I keep telling students whenever I ask them कि Cold War क्या था, शीत युद्ध बोलते हैं, इसका मतलब कि क्या कोई युद्ध नहीं हुआ था, there were no boots on the ground. People say it is an ideological battle. No, it was called for Soviet Union's territory or US's territory. It was not called for Iran, Iraq, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. It was not. Many people died there. The war was fought in many places. You had spies all over in different countries. Even the first time, as I told you, when Truman went to greet him at the airport, because he wanted ki Nehru will side towards US. And when they understood that okay, India is not part of our league in that sense, so they started in simplistic terms supporting Pakistan. The same went with Egypt. Egypt ka Nasser was the second president of Egypt, came from a farmer's background and rose to military. And उसने पहला president, क्योंकि Egypt was also a British colony, and वहां फाइट किया, वहां के किंग से फाइट किया, हु वाज जस्ट अ स्टूज, एंड फिर उनको हराया। एंड नासिर के पहले राकिब जो बने थे प्रेसिडेंट, उनको खुद जेल में बंद कर दिया, हाउस अरेस्ट कर दिया, एंड then he became the president himself. But Nasser was so, in the entire of West Asia, in the entire of Middle East, Nasser was so popular. वो पूरे अरब कंट्रीज को साथ लेने का, यूनिटी का बात करता था। और लोग उसका रेडियो पे, वॉइस ऑफ अरब्स जब रेडियो स्टेशन शुरू हुआ था, तो पीपल यूज्ड टू लाइक लिसन टू हिम एज इफ ही इज देयर गॉड। एंड इजिप्ट को वो फोर फ्रंट पे लेके आया इन टर्म्स ऑफ मिलिट्री, इन टर्म्स ऑफ एवरीथिंग। तो जब सुएज कनाल क्राइसिस होता है, क्योंकि सुएज कनाल बनाने में ब्रिटिश और फ्रेंच का रोल था, और जो शिप्स वहां से क्रॉस करती हैं तो उनका टैक्सेशन ब्रिटिश लेते थे, तो नासिर सेड कि नहीं, वील नेशनलाइज इट, यूके कैन नॉट कंट्रोल इट एनीमोर। And there was a massive fight. On one hand, there was UK, Israel, and France, and the other hand, Egypt fighting it all alone. And then US had to intervene and say कि नहीं, we cannot have, during this time of Cold War, Egypt going against us. So Suez Canal को Egyptian territory में होने के बावजूद भी नासिर को fight करना पड़ा. And he was so popular कि उसके रेडियो का इंटरसेप्शन उसकी कंट्री में आके तो स्पाइस नहीं कर सकते, सो दे वुड गो टू नियर बाय कंट्रीज, लाइक दे विल गो टू सिप्रस एंड अदर्स एंड ट्राई टू डिसाइफर रेडियो सिग्नल से कि नासिर बोल क्या रहा है. And when I wanted to do an archival study of Nasir's recordings, I could not find them because all of them had been burnt by the successors, who wanted to rewrite the history and rewrite public memory. So power is very, very vindictive, and this is drawn from nature. And bipolarity हो, multipolarity हो, या unipolar world हो, सबके अपने patterns होते हैं of behavior, and war is something which is imminent. It cannot be erased. I asked a few of my colleagues at Amnesty and other places that why can't you control or stop war? I mean, like, you work very well in giving development aid. You work very well in humanitarian, repercussions. लेकिन आप रोक क्यों नहीं सकते हो? Why don't you stop it? होगा ही नहीं तब. You don't have to. So all of them, like Red Cross and others, they said very clearly that our foundation is on the basis of the fact that we can't stop war. We can mitigate the crisis. हम उस crisis को कम कर सकते हैं, but we can't stop the war. क्योंकि इस पूरी दुनिया में anarchy है. Anarchy is, there is no world government. UN is not your world government. I'll tell you why. And हर एक balance of power होता है, एक इक्विलिब्रियम होता है, एक स्टेटस क्वो होता है. जो मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड पे पावर में है, वो कुछ भी करेगा कि वो मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड में पावर में ही रहे और नीचे ना जाए. This is why your First World War and Second World War took place, because there was an entire team, Axis and Allied, who were against each other. In the First World War, it was Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire fighting against UK, France, to a certain extent, US. In the Second World War, you had again UK, Soviet Union, US, France fighting against Germany, Italy, Japan. So balance of power को वापस correct करने के लिए ही आपका world wars किया गया. And states जो होते हैं, जो weaker states होते हैं, वो एक दूसरे से alliance बनाते हैं, regional blocks बनाते हैं, और उनका हमेशा एक threat रहता है, fear रहता है, dilemma रहता है that they will be attacked. And this is something which cannot be erased. Now, what is security dilemma? Security dilemma is like for the case of Israel. Israel is surrounded with all the Arab states. And the very making of Israel in 15th of May 1948 led to another kind of Holocaust called as Al-Nakba. Al का मतलब Arabic में होता है the, Nakba का मतलब होता है exodus of Muslim and Christian Palestinians who were living over there. Now, every day if you follow news in West Bank, in Gaza, you will come to know that this person was injured or this Palestinian was killed or whatever. Now, why does Israel do it? Why did they construct the apartheid wall? Why there are like cases, for example, when I went to West Bank, I met a girl who was 18 years old, and we were in Jericho. Um, I asked her about her family and parents. She says she doesn't know much about them. I was a bit shocked कि अपने parents के बारे में नहीं जान. So she said that when she was born जैसे normally होता है कि कोई lady pregnant होती है तो वो अपनी माँ के यहाँ जाती है. So in West Bank, her mother had a green card to go to her mother's place and stay there for a couple of months to deliver. उसकी मम्मी जाती हैं from Jericho to the other place. बच्चा पैदा होता है लेकिन बच्चे का तो ग्रीन कार्ड नहीं है. So the mother is allowed to go back to where she came from, but not the child. The child is then raised by the grandparents. And once a year during Ramzan or wherever, the mother can come and meet her child. Now, why this kind of restrictions of mobility and restrictions of movement, and you can't cross? I want to go from one place of, say, for example, I want to go from Noida to Gurgaon. I can go in 1 hour, 1.5 hours. But if there are walls all over Delhi, and we can experience it right now because a lot of flyovers are under construction, it takes a lot of time. But what if there are that you have to go to Gurgaon from Noida, so you cannot go through Delhi, or there are limitations when you can go, there are time zones when you can go, there are road maps through which you can go. You just cannot use any road. You need a permit to all of that. Now you have to understand in the defense of Israel. Israel was established after the Holocaust, and it was surrounded by all, it is still surrounded by all the Arab states, and it always has this dilemma that कभी भी कोई भी Arab state उसके ऊपर war कर देगा. It has happened in 1948, it has happened in 67, it has happened in 73. Now they have started having peacekeeping accords with Morocco, UAE and others. तो अब उनको threat perception कम है, but उनका threat perception बहुत ज्यादा है, so they will do preemptive attack. Preemptive attack मतलब सामने वाला अटैक करे उससे पहले ही अटैक करेंगे, और सामने वाला अटैक करेगा हमें पता है, because you are in that fear zone. And so they have military conscription. So when you are 18 years old, आप 18 साल के होते हैं, you think of doing CUET and going to college. But 18 साल के वहाँ के students, they have to, like boys have to be in the military for 2 years, and they are, in West Bank or Gaza, stationed there for 2 years. Women have to be there for 1.5 years. It is mandatory. उसके बाद आप college कर सकते हैं. If you refuse it, you have to pay the price of it, which is arrest, jail, whatever, till the time you don't have a medical condition. तो क्यों security dilemma है Israel की? Because of the very emergence of how it declared itself independent, and it sees everyone as an enemy. जब महाभारत में शकुनी के कैरेक्टर को बहुत ही नेगेटिवली पोर्ट्रे किया जाता है, शकुनी के कैरेक्टर को नेगेटिवली पोर्ट्रे करने का रीजन है नहीं. He was just taking revenge to what happened to his sister. And any brother would do so. in that case. तो शकुनी ने एक बार दुर्योधन को एक चीज बोला था कि जिसका द ब्रीफ एक्सप्लेनेशन इज कि हर इंसान तुम्हारा शत्रु है, हर इंसान तुम्हारा शत्रु है। मित्रता बाद में होती है, शत्रुता पहले ही हो जाती है, पहली मिलन में शत्रुता होती है, मित्रता बहुत बाद होती है। दैट इज अ रियलिस्ट पर्सपेक्टिव। एंड all of them, there are terms like chain ganging and buck passing. इसका मतलब क्या होता है कि you cannot have, अगर आप पावर को ठीक से नहीं परसीव करोगे तो आपको अलायंसेस में, रीजनल ब्लॉक्स में और ये सारे जो आप कॉरपोरेशंस बना रहे हो उसमें इरेशनल फेथ होगा कि अच्छा अगर हम पे अटैक करेगा तो ये सेव कर लेगा, वो सेव करेगा। दैट इज बक पासिंग, that I'm not alone, or I will be saved, which is the wrong understanding of power. तो काफी सारे रियलिस्ट स्कॉलर्स हुए और इनका लीनिएज बहुत ही पुराना है, जैसे थुसिदिडिस थे, निकोलो मैकियावेली थे, थॉमस हॉब्स थे, जॉन जैक रूसो थे, एंड वॉल्स, केनेथ वॉल्स। इनके बारे में I'll tell you and I'll give you the reason why they turned what they turned to be. थुसिदिडिस जो थे वो एथेंस के, जब एथेंस और स्पार्टा के बीच में पेलोपोनेशियन वॉर हुआ था ड्यूरिंग द 5th century BC, उस समय देखो इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं था, बट he strongly believed, he was in the military, and he was considered as a father of scientific history, and he understood कि किस तरीके से human beings are selfish. Just look, जब कभी civil war होता है, massacre होता है, plague आता है. There was a Athenian plague during his lifetime, and he survived it. और इन्होंने अपने बारे में इस बुक में लिखा जो आगे जाके बहुत फेमस होती है, हिस्टोरिकल रिकॉर्ड्स में जाती है। ही क्वेश्चनड कि आप कभी भी देखिए कि कहीं भी मैसेकर होगा, सिविल वॉर होगा, फ्लड आ जाएगा, लोग अपने आप को बचाएंगे, वो किसी और को नहीं बचाएंगे। टू ईच इट्स ओन। जब एथेंस ने स्पार्टा के साथ अटैक किया एंड वाइस वर्सा, it was blood for blood. That is how wars are fought, even though this is ancient history. जब the question everyone asks, कि इतनी सारी countries, when Zelensky allowed कि यूक्रेन में people can have guns for their self protection, what will be the repercussion of it after 10 years? If the war ends, those civilians who survive would have gun, they will not trust each other. There will be a civil war after the invasion of so-called Russia in Ukraine, with so much of arms being dumped into it. Look at what is happening in US. You have a 6-year-old child killing the nursery teacher with a gun in Virginia. 6-year-old child. उससे पहले यूटा में हुआ था. All these things, there was a knife attack अभी 4-5 दिन पहले in Paris. Why to go so far? दादरा नगर हवेली आप जानते हैं, 3-4 दिन पहले न्यूज में था कि वहां 9 साल के बच्चे को ह्यूमन सैक्रिफाइस दिया गया है. उस बच्चे का ह्यूमन सैक्रिफाइस किया गया, 9 साल के बच्चे का. So what is the world? You are just competing and fighting for yourself. There's no one coming to save you. But then this is an individual aspect. Realism talks from the country perspective. That every country, to avoid all these situations of massacres and civil wars, has to fight and defend itself, because it is something which is going to happen. दूसरे कैरेक्टर थे निकोलो मैकियावेली, इटालियन इन द सेंस कि जब आपका रेनेसा पीरियड शुरू हुआ था, ही वाज ड्यूरिंग द टाइम पीरियड ऑफ योर लियोनार्डो दा विंची एंड माइकलैंजेलो. He was a diplomat from Florence, and he was a philosopher. And Renaissance period में इनका बहुत योगदान भी था. But he wrote this book, The Prince. And this book will be published in 1532. And इनको political philosophy or political science का father भी कहा जाता है, of realist perspective, of vindictive realism, which is eye for an eye. The Prince उन्होंने जेल में लिखा था. And he writes about that, every ruler has to be a lion and a fox. Lion so that you attack, fox because you can be deceptive. You have to. So Niccolo Machiavelli, jitne bhi, jaise there was this recent book which was that how by all the prime ministers and presidents who become, presidents and prime ministers, they have a Machiavellian complex. Lion and fox. And this book changed. It gave so much of, it was talking about Florence and Italy at that point of time, and it changed the entire narrative. It became very famous. Aaj bhi, The Prince is read widely by a lot of people who are in diplomacy. If you want to go into IFS and other things, aapko Prince padhaya jayega as a political theorist on how to attack as a discourse. Then came Thomas Hobbes. थॉमस हॉब्स आपके इंग्लिश ब्रिटिश फिलोसफर थे. इनका बहुत सारा योगदान रहा है. इनकी बहुत फेमस किताब है लेवियाथन, एंड ही टॉक्स अबाउट सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट थ्योरी. नाउ व्हाट इज सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट? द मोमेंट यू आर बोर्न इन अ पर्टिकुलर स्टेट, you enter in a contract with that state. You might be oblivious, आपको नहीं पता, लेकिन you are in a contract with a state. In a state like India, the contract is called democracy. That your vote is equal to the vote of others and everyone is equal and all of it. You have the right to change the parties and everything. In countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, it is theocracy, religion headed governance. You're born in it. In Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all these countries, you're not allowed to vote. But the state will give you everything. They will give you houses, cars, medical care, all of it free of cost. There was a British journalist who went to write about the uprising that took place in Bahrain in 2011. Pearl Square, उनका मनामा जो capital है, वहां पे हुआ था. तो he said कि जो cab driver है उनको रोक दिया पर्ल स्क्वायर पहुंचने से 2-3 किलोमीटर पहले. तो he's like, है क्यों रोक दिए? It's like कि सारा गाड़ियों का भीड़ लगा हुआ है. तो it's like Bentley, BMW, Ford, you call it, and all these high class cars, everyone has come and they have parked it there and then they have gone for the protest. That was the level of richness or the perception of it by the journalist. So social contract kya hota hai? The moment you are born, why are individuals not in the realist perspective considered? Because the moment they are born in a particular state, they are in a contract with that state. So the perspective of the state is important and not the individual. So Thomas Hobbes ka ye concept tha. Then you have John Jacques Rousseau. इनका political philosophy age of enlightenment में बहुत काम दिया, which was scientific questioning. Anything which you don't have evidence of does not exist. And इन्होंने पूरा discourse दिया inequality पे और social contract पे फिर से कि human nature ही इस तरीके का है कि you are going to have fights and one has to take control, and one has to, the nation has to, that the French Empire, for example. Now, there was a very interesting Al Jazeera documentary, which was that in these countries, you have three names. like the first name, your middle name, and surname. Most of the colonies where they colonized did not have the concept of three names. But when census started, so they started introducing the concept of three names: your first name, your middle name, and your surname. Now, if you go to an Arab and you ask them, most of them will be Abdu or Abdul or Muhammad. That is not their name. That is maybe the family name. उनका नाम बहुत लंबा होगा, in which they mention कि वो किस गांव से हैं, उनके father कौन है, and all of it. But because it was so difficult for them to understand, the French in Algeria, when they colonized it, made it mandatory कि सबका नाम जो होगा वो three words का होगा. Okay. Now, what they did was that जब जिसका कोई नाम नहीं होता था, कुछ मिडिल नेम नहीं है या सर नेम कंफ्यूजिंग है, they would write in the census some abuse for it in French. अब स्टेट के दस्तावेज में उस इंसान का नाम, जो फ्रेंच नहीं जानता है वो नहीं जानेगा कि दिस इज एन अब्यूज, लेकिन बिकॉज जैसे आपको अंग्रेजी पढ़ाई जाती है वैसे अल्जीरिया में भी फ्रेंच पढ़ाया जाता था. सो इमेजिन कि अ चाइल्ड इज अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि उसका नाम ही उसका सबसे बड़ा अब्यूज है, because how he or she or they have been named by the colonizers. So the entire idea that state again is the most powerful. So nation states are central to your international relations and global politics. They act alone. They are rational actors. Every prime minister, president will rationally think for the interest of their own particular country and then do any kind of warfare. They will do warfare because war is imminent. Barry Buzen, who's a very, very famous international theorist, he said कि जो आपको बहुत ही स्मूथ सर्फेस ऑफ रियलिज्म दिखता है, इसमें एक सिंपल सा लीनियर थ्योरी नहीं है, इसमें बहुत सारे चेंजेस हैं. तो ये चेंजेस क्या हैं? सो पहला क्लासिकल रियलिज्म तो यही समझता है, जो बेसिक आपका मैकियावेली और थुसिडिडिस के टाइम का है, कि ह्यूमन नेचर का प्रोमिनेंट पार्ट है लस्ट, कंपटीशन, सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट. एंड इसीलिए यही चीज स्टेट भी मिरर करता है. और क्योंकि नेचर ही इस तरीके से है, दैट इज व्हाई इट इज एमिनेंट टू सी इट इन दिस वे. दिस इज क्लासिकल रियलिज्म. क्लासिकल रियलिज्म दो भाग में बटा हुआ है. वन इज ऑफेंसिव एंड द अदर इज डिफेंसिव रियलिज्म. ऑफेंसिव रियलिज्म इस चीज को अज्यूम करके चलता है कि हर कंट्री अपना पावर बढ़ाना चाहता है, इसलिए वो एक्सपेंशन करेगा. कौन सी ऐसी कंट्री नहीं है जो अपने पुराने टाइम के नॉस्टैल्जिया में नहीं रहती है? रशिया को देखो, उसका नॉस्टैल्जिया है सोवियत यूनियन और रशियन एम्पायर का, कि पूरा ईस्टर्न यूरोप हमारा है. यूके का नॉस्टैल्जिया है कि 1/5 ऑफ द वर्ल्ड उसका है, बॉर्डर्स तो उसी ने बनाया है. स्पेन एंड कैटलोनिया का, स्पेन का पूरा नॉस्टैल्जिया था, कैटलोनिया उसका पार्ट है. ग्रीस और टर्की के बीच में बहुत सारे आइलैंड्स हैं, उनका नॉस्टैल्जिया है क्योंकि टर्की वाज द ऑटोमन एम्पायर एंड ग्रीक वाज लाइक द ग्रीक सिविलाइजेशन. इटली का अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया है ऑफ द रोमन सिविलाइजेशन. जम्मू कश्मीर पे अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया है. म्यांमार का अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया है. चाइना का अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया है, अरुणाचल प्रदेश उसी का पार्ट है. हर एम्पायर का अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया होता है और वो एक्सपेंशन करेगा, इसीलिए वॉर एमिनेंट है. This is not the first time when Russia has invaded Ukraine. It is going on since 2013-14. यूएस का अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया है. सेंट्रल अमेरिका को वो अलग एंटिटीज के फॉर्म में देखता ही नहीं है. वेस्ट इंडीज को अलग एंटिटी के फॉर्म में देखता ही नहीं है. वेस्ट इंडीज इज नॉट अ कंट्री, इट इज अ archipelago of nations. तो ऑफेंसिव रियलिज्म इज बेस्ड ऑन दिस नॉस्टैल्जिया ऑफ पावर. डिफेंसिव रियलिज्म का मतलब क्या होता है कि आपको अपने आप को डिफेंड करना है, तो आपको अपनी सिक्योरिटी, बॉर्डर्स, ये सारी चीजें जो हैं बेहतर करनी होंगी. यू हैव द अपार्थीड वॉल, यू हैव एन एंटायर आयरन डोम, यू हैव border roads, safety, all of it that you are ready to defend when it comes. तो ये सारी चीजें आपके इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम में हैं एंड दिस विल कंटिन्यू बिकॉज इस तरीके से ही आपका कोई भी ट्रांसनेशनल एक्टर या इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन या मल्टीनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का कोई पावर नहीं है जो आपकी कंट्री पे एक्चुअली कोई रूल रेगुलेशन लगा सके. इंटरनेशनल क्रिमिनल कोर्ट ऑफ जस्टिस भी लिमिटेड है उस टर्म्स में. सो कंपटीशन को कोई खत्म नहीं कर सकता. एंड दिस इज Kenneth Walls basically gave the neo-realist idea or the structural realist idea of realism. इन्होंने क्या आइडिया दिया? इन्होंने ये बोला कि नहीं, इट इज नॉट बिकॉज ऑफ कि आप नेचर देख रहे हैं तो रियलिज्म का कॉन्सेप्ट आप निकाल रहे हैं. इट इज नॉट बिकॉज ऑफ नेचर and not because of human lust and power and all of it. No, it is because the system that the structure that we live in, the entire world system is anarchy. वहां chaos है, सिर्फ anarchy है. एंड जो स्ट्रक्चरल रियलिज्म है या न्यू रियलिज्म है वो ये मानता है कि बहुत सारे रीजंस हैं. ही यूज्ड अ डिडक्टिव अप्रोच एंड ही सेड कि वर्ल्ड इतना वैरायटी, डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी है, इतने सारे कॉजेज एंड इफेक्ट्स हैं आपके इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम में, तो आपके कॉन्फ्लिक्ट और वॉरफेयर ह्यूमन नेचर के कारण नहीं होते हैं बट बिकॉज कि देयर इज नो इंटरनेशनल सोवरीन पावर टू प्रिवेंट इट. देयर इज नो चेक गार्ड टू प्रिवेंट. देयर इज नो वर्ल्ड सिस्टम टू प्रिवेंट. आपका जो स्ट्रक्चरल सिस्टम ऑफ द वर्ल्ड है उसी का ये पैटर्न है कि वो लड़ेगा अपने एंटिटीज के बीच में बिकॉज आपके पूरे वर्ल्ड सिस्टम में एनार्की है. इट इज अ स्ट्रक्चरल सिस्टम. इट इज द नेचर ऑफ योर सिस्टम कि उसमें एनार्की है. द सिस्टम विल करप्ट यू. द सिस्टम विल मेक अ कंट्री पावरफुल और वीकर. तो उन्होंने ये बोला कि आपका पूरा, सो ही टुक द लेवल ऑफ एनालिसिस टू द इंटरनेशनल सिस्टम. ही डिड नॉट टॉक अबाउट इंडिविजुअल्स, ही डिड नॉट टॉक अबाउट नेशन स्टेट. ये दूसरे लेवल ऑफ एनालिसिस पे ले गए जो नियो रियलिज्म का एनालिसिस है कि कोई भी अथॉरिटेटिव वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट तो है नहीं जो इन्फोर्स करेगा पावर. तो जो सोवरेन कंट्रीज होती हैं, जो इंडिपेंडेंट कंट्रीज होती हैं, उन सब के पास, किसी के पास कुछ मटेरियल है, किसी के पास कुछ मटेरियल है, वो आपस में compete करते रहेंगी क्योंकि सबके पास सब चीज नहीं है. रिसोर्स का स्कार्सिटी और there is an absence of resources, and just because of this your colonialism took place and all of it. ना आपके दिमाग में आएगा कि तब यूएन क्या है और व्हाट वाज द लीग ऑफ नेशंस. सो पहला, यूनाइटेड नेशंस इज नॉट अ सोवरीन वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट. इट इज लाइक एन इंटरनेशनल एनजीओ. यूएन चार्टर जो 1945 में बना था, यूएनएससी के जो रेजोल्यूशंस होते हैं, दीज आर रिकमेंडेशंस, ये बाइंडिंग नहीं है. दे आर नॉट मैंडेटरी. सो व्हेन यूएस इन्वेडेड इराक, उसने कोई रेजोल्यूशन भी पास नहीं करवाया था. एंड चार्टर बहुत क्लियरली बोलता है कि आपके P5 में कौन कौन सी कंट्री है. यूएस है, यूके है, फ्रांस, चाइना, रशिया है. क्यों है ये? बिकॉज दे won the second world war, all of them. इसीलिए वो हैं. बट और ये सब फंड करते हैं यूएन को. प्राइमरी फंडर जो है सबसे पहले अमेरिका है, उसके बाद चाइना है. यूएन इज नॉट वर्ल्ड कंट्रोल सिस्टम जिसका थॉट्स और स्टेटमेंट्स जो है वो मैंडेटरी हो. नहीं है. यू कैन ओवरराइड इट. सो यूएस क्यों इन्वेड कर पाया? क्योंकि पहले भी किया था 91 में इराक को. जब बुश के फादर ने किया था, सद्दाम हुसैन ही था उस समय हेड, कुवैत को लिबरेट करने के लिए। दैट वाज द फर्स्ट गल्फ वॉर। एंड दूसरा चीज है कि कंट्री कब सोचती है कि हम अटैक कर सकते हैं, जब उसके पास रिसोर्सेज हों। यूएस के पास ऑयल को छोड़ के बाकी सारे रिसोर्सेज थे, which was GDP per capita, military spending, military personnel, money, arms, artillery, armaments, all of it. And Iraq then became a weaker product of it. And your entire linking with Iraq having weapons of mass destruction was never proved. So Kenneth Walls, who's no longer alive, he would say that US was able to invade because there was no other, after specifically the end of Cold War, there was no power to even stop it. You don't have international power system at all. There's no check guard. There's no policeman or woman. Most of these theories are patriarchal in nature. But what was the loss for US? No loss for that. And they also made it mandatory. They started this concept of embedded journalism. Embedded journalism का मतलब जैसे for example कोई चीज किसी चीज में मिली हुई है, जैसे my fingers, एक हाथ दूसरे हाथ में embedded है, मिल गया है इससे, इसे अलग ऐसे नहीं है, ऐसे है। सो जब उन्होंने इराक वॉर किया सेकंड जो 2003 का था, दे स्टार्टेड विद द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ एम्बेडेड जर्नलिज्म कि कोई भी अगर जर्नलिस्ट जाता है यूएस से, यूके से, फ्रांस से, वो यूएस मिलिट्री के साथ ही काम करेगा और जो जो मिलिट्री बताएगी वही रिपोर्ट लिखेगा। व्हाई? बिकॉज वियतनाम के दौरान न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स ने पूरा मिलाई मैसेकर ऑफ 1968 पब्लिश किया था। देयर वाज मैसिव प्रोटेस्ट बाय द अमेरिकन्स अगेंस्ट द वियतनाम इन्वेजन। They didn't want it. They started with the concept of embedded journalism, that no journalist is going to write the other side of the story. It is our side of the story. You are with us or against us. As simple as that, as linear as that, and as vindictive as that. So if you look at the realist from a realist perspective, you will say that it was much more practical. You're not wearing rose-tinted glasses to look at the world. You're seeing world as what it is, right? आपके सब जगह, वेयर इज इट नॉट हैपनिंग एक्चुअली, कहाँ नहीं हो रहा है वॉर, और कब नहीं हो रहा होता है वॉर। I gave you the example of India China right now, then India Myanmar right now, um, then there is Sri Lanka का सिविल वॉर चल रहा था, उसके बाद फिर you just go to in Latin America, you go to Peru, Brazil, Chile, वहां बहुत ही स्ट्रॉन्ग सिविल वॉर चल रहा है। You go to Chad, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, going on. Between Sudan and South Sudan चल रहा है। आपका ब्लैक लाइव्स मूवमेंट की जो फाउंडर थे उसके कजन का डेथ उसी तरीके से अभी 2-3 दिन पहले हुआ है, जैसे जॉर्ज फ्लॉयड का 2020 में हुआ था, विच इज अ मैसिव disheartening news that another black man killed in the same way. The police said that he was committing felony. You go anywhere, रशिया का, यूक्रेन, इन फ्रांस फॉर एग्जाम्पल जो टर्किश प्रेसिडेंट है रईप अर्दोगान, उसका एफिजी बर्न करके उल्टा करके लटकाया जा रहा था, जलाया जा रहा था। सो टर्की आस्क्ड फ्रांस के क्या हो रहा है? दिस हैपेंड 2 days back because Turkey wants to get entry into NATO. Turkey believes it to be more European than Middle Eastern or West Asian. उसका पोजीशन भी वैसा ही है जो स्ट्रेटेजिकली। आपके ग्रीस ने There were 10 plus rescue workers जो मेडिटेरेनियन सी से क्रॉस करके ग्रीस आ रहे थे. उनको कैपिटल पनिशमेंट दे दिया था कि ये एस्पाइनेज कर रहे हैं हमारे ऊपर, जासूसी. And these rescue workers were trying to save people who were drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. But इतना ज़्यादा influx of refugees हुआ है कि Greece is finding itself in a security dilemma. So everywhere, if you think it's even in Antarctica में भी अलग-अलग countries के zones हैं, military zones हैं for resource drilling and extraction, even in Antarctica, where you don't have credible human population. And then there is a deep state. Now, what is a deep state? एक तो आपका state होता है, फिर आपका deep state होता है, which is made of the businessmen, the retired military personnel or working military personnel, your intelligence agents, all of it. You will never come to know that in which country what deep state is functioning in which way. Very often जब Barack Obama ने ये बोला था कि he will close the biggest prison of the world, which is in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, which started over on 14th of January, 21 years back, after 9/11, he was not able to close it. There are more than 700-800 people in Guantanamo Bay, most of them Muslims, who are detained over there without any kind of evidence. आज भी Guantanamo Bay जाने के लिए, even if you're a lawyer defending a particular person, you have hundreds of bureaucratic challenges to go. Heavily surveillance, इसका proof, मतलब there's no picture of it. इतना high surveillance है, there's no aerial photo of it. So हर जगह there is some kind of skirmish, specifically during at borders of all these countries. Countries क्या, आपके state के borders पे conflict है. So it is from the realist perspective, and this is because every country will try to preserve itself because either it is in offensive position, it is in defensive position. या तो you are a realist thinking, classical realist thinking कि it is because of nature, human behavior, or you are like Kenneth Walls, who is a neo-realist who believed that आपका जो world का system ही है वो इस तरीके से fractured and fragmented है that you will fight against one another. But you will fight an eye for an eye, and that is the most practical way of looking at the world instead of wearing rose-tinted glasses and believing that no, we are forming regional blocks for cooperation, or we are doing this for cooperation and common good or greater good, whatever they say. Ki greater good is a utilitarian principle, ki maximum good for maximum number of people. लेकिन ऐसा होता नहीं है. The world is as it is. And the deductive approach, the positivist approach, क्योंकि इतने सारे experiments हुए हैं, warfare हुए हैं, death हुए हैं, आपका positivist approach is realism that believes it is scientific and it strongly caters to what is happening and will always happen. You cannot avoid it. You cannot stop it. So आज की क्लास यहाँ तक है.